Alors, le prochain panel s'intitule Puissances cyber, regard croisé des nations, Cyber Powers, Perspective from Nation. Nous avons la chance d'avoir un panel qui sera animé aujourd'hui par Judith Bort, qui est Senior Director, Planning and Implementation at Rogers Cybersecurity Catalyst. And she welcomed on the stage also the speaker. We have Bridget Walsh, Associate Head at Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. Hi, Bridget. We also have Miguel Debruyker, Directeur Général au Centre de Cybersécurité de Belgique, le CCB. Bonjour. Nous avons également Nitin Natarajan, former Deputy Director at the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. Hi. On est également sur scène Antonas Aleknavicius, Director at the National Cybersecurity Center of Lithuania. Hello. Et le dernier, mais non le moindre, le Major Général Christophe Husson, chef du commandement du ministère de l'Intérieur, donc le cyberespace en France, communément appelé le comme Cybermi. Alors, bonjour, Major. La discussion est à vous, 45 minutes, et à la fin, ils resteront sur scène, près de la scène, pour pouvoir répondre à vos questions. Et ce sera un entretien en anglais. Alors, encore une fois, pour ceux et celles qui viennent se joindre à vous, n'oubliez pas de scanner le code QR. Bon entretien.
Good morning, everyone. What? Wonderful. As mentioned, my name is Judith Bortz, and I am the Senior Director of the Rogers Cybersecurity Catalyst. We are a national center for training, innovation, and collaboration in cybersecurity, and we work at the intersect of industry, government, and academia. So much of what we do, as with all of my colleagues on the stage, is around partnerships and collaboration. And that collaborative spirit is really the theme today for our discussion. Cyber powers, perspectives from nations. Countries today are grappling with how to define and defend their place in the digital order. Cybersecurity is not just a technical issue, as we know, and increasingly it's becoming a matter of economic strength, national sovereignty, and international trust. So we have a lot to discuss today, and I'd just like to provide you with a brief roadmap. We're going to start with what it means to be a cyber power today. Then we're going to move into what is keeping us up at night, what are the key threats that we're facing and that we're working on. We're going to move into a discussion around collaboration and trust and what it means in our increasingly complex geopolitical times. And then we'll look ahead to the next 5 years. So let's get started. Power, security, technology, they are increasingly intertwined. Let's start today then with a discussion around your perspectives, rapid fire, of what it means for a country to be a cyber power in today's global arena. And I'll run this way, so we'll start with Bridget.
Est-ce que ça marche? Okay. Bonjour, je suis très heureuse d'être ici aujourd'hui. So Bridget Walsh at the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. When I think about being a cyber power, there are a few things that come to mind. One, it's the understanding and the use of the technology. So we don't take full advantage of securing technology until we really understand it, unless we are throwing the full weight of our research into new technologies and leveraging them, like artificial intelligence, and being ready to defend. On the other side, there's a human being aspect to it. So it is about being able to look at our processes, look at our governance, look at how we understand cybersecurity and technology. If I think about some of the threats that we face right now, like ransomware, it's very often not the technology that's taken advantage of. It's very often the human beings. So how are we making sure that our population, that our governments, that everyone in industry is very cybersecure aware? And lastly, I would say it's about making sure everyone understands capabilities. If you think to the past, before we had cyber threats, and we think to traditional kinetic threats and more, a lot of what was communicated is about what a country's power has. What weaponry do they have? What are they able to do? So being a cyber power is also about making sure that everybody understands your capability. that it's well known what you can do, that your defenses is strong and that you're secure and that you're aware.
Major General Hassan?
Bien, bonjour à tous, alors je vais parler en français. La cyberpuissance, c'est aussi avoir cette capacité à pouvoir décliner la cyber dans toutes ses composantes. Je pense en particulier, si je prends l'exemple de la France, à la cybersécurité qui est assurée par une agence, l'Agence nationale de sécurité des systèmes d'information. Donc c'est la protection des infrastructures. Mais on a également la cyberdéfense. C'est une entité qui s'appelle le comme de la défense qui l'assure au sein de la France. Lutte informatique offensive, lutte informatique défensive, lutte informatique informationnelle. Il y a également une troisième composante, hein, c'est la lutte contre la cybercriminalité. C'est le rôle du commandement du ministère de l'Intérieur dans le cyberespace que je commande aujourd'hui. Et je rajouterai aussi une quatrième composante hein, qui est la cyberdiplomatie, qui est importante. Et typiquement, la France a qualifié il n'y a pas très longtemps une attaque en provenance de la Russie, des services de renseignement russes, APT-28. C'est en ligne sur le site du ministère des Affaires étrangères et ça fait partie aussi de l'ensemble des actions qui sont réalisées en matière de cyber. Je rajouterai également d'autres acteurs, je pense en particulier au ministère de la Justice, puisque dans le rôle qui est le mien de la lutte contre la cybercriminalité, on a besoin aussi de travailler en collaboration étroite avec les forces en charge de diriger la police judiciaire. Et puis également une entité qui a été créée récemment en France, qui s'appelle Viginum, qui a pour mission de pouvoir identifier les actions d'influence à l'encontre de la France, notamment tout ce qui est désinformation. Et donc tout cet écosystème concourt à une cyberpuissance et ce ne sont pas des silos, ce sont des entités qui échangent entre elles régulièrement. Et si je prends typiquement toutes ces actions qui ont été réalisées de manière collaborative, elles ont concouru à la réalisation de la revue nationale stratégique. Et dans sa dimension cyber, chacune des entités a apporté sa pierre à l'édifice. Bon.
Thank you very much. And I want to pull on that thread of cyber diplomacy in some of the conversations. And tell us, what does being a cyber power today mean?
Thank you very much for having me here. It's a really pleasure to talk with colleagues also on this stage. Cyber power, from our perspective, begins with acknowledgement on what you have and how country looks like. Cybersecurity here provides a lot of tools on how to do it. If you, for instance, begin with asset management, and as every organization should, if you do it on a state level, on a national level, you will have a good start becoming cyber power. We in Lithuania recently adopted, or at least trying to adopt, a know your client principles to move forward. Because we have expanded a number of our supervised clients from a couple of hundreds to a couple of thousands. So knowing their problems, knowing their daily business, on what we have, how we approach their cybersecurity, really help us to understand and to provide, I would say, products and services to that majority of entities, of institutions, be it public or private sector. And when we know what we have, we can move towards resilience, we can move towards risk management, and ensure that our services as a state services will continue. And I believe the approach that we ask to adopt of single entity for a single entity, if we adopt the same approach at a state level, that will be really great and ensures our cyber power.
Miguel, in Belgium?
Yes, well, first of all, cyber power or cybersecurity power, to be honest, I don't know that many countries that I would dare to give that label, to be honest. As my colleagues were saying, it's first of all about collaboration, national collaboration. We have written a new draft strategy on national level, and we split up cybersecurity from cyber law enforcement, from cyber defense, from cyber diplomacy. And cyber intelligence is a common layer. And the reason why we are splitting it up is to have a better collaboration, to make it clear what is cybersecurity and what is cyber law enforcement and what is cyber defense. For instance, it was Stoltenberg who 2 years ago in Berlin said, we as NATO have to defend our hospitals against ransomware. And then you have to ask yourself the question, is that a mission for defense? Or is it a mission for law enforcement? Or is it cybersecurity for national CSIRTs and national authorities? If you don't clearly define those different roles, you get overlaps, you get competition. Believe me, you don't have trust and you have no collaboration. So getting that act together at the first stage, for me, is very crucial. Don't forget the private sector. There's no public space in cyberspace. When I go out this building, I'm on the street, I'm on public space. In cyberspace, I'm on the network of a private company, my own computer. I'm using private carriers, etc. Where is public space? So it's different. You have to build resilience. That means that your population must be able to handle and use that internet wisely. How do you do that? How do you train them? If you want to be a superpower, you need super users. Your companies must have the minimal cybersecurity hygiene. Believe me, that's not the case. We have developed the Safe on Web Cyber Fundamentals framework for all companies. Has been picked up by other countries in the EU as basic layer, but honestly, we're not there yet. Also on government level, you must be able to act as a government and respond in cyberspace. So you need a lot of different elements, and I wouldn't dare to say certainly that Belgium is a superpower or a super cybersecurity power yet.
Bitten?
So after that group, I'll just say I agree with everything. So I think there's three elements when we look at this as far as defining superpowers and the direction that we want to go. I think the first is investment, and the investment both of money and of time and prioritization within the public and the private sector to make cybersecurity a true priority in what we do every day. That we are doing everything from building hardware and software more securely to buying and investing in hardware and software that is more secure. And also taking the investments we need from money perspective to make sure that we are setting the right, taking the right actions on the public stage for governments to build more secure networks for their operations. So I think there is an investment element of this. Secondly, I think that there's a coordination aspect of this, that looking within our respective nations, how are we able to coordinate effectively between the public and the private sector? And that's private sector, not just the vendor community, but looking at critical infrastructure, owners and operators, looking at academia, looking at nonprofit organizations, looking at individual people in the work that they need to do to strengthen their individual security. And how are we doing that in a coordinated way within the nation to, again, make sure that we are prioritizing cybersecurity as an element of what we do day in and day out, and that we're taking the steps that we all need to take. I always say that everybody has a role in cybersecurity, and we need everybody to play their role. And that truly is not just the cyber experts, but it's everything from policy individuals to politicians to individual people who decide to click on a link to get $1 million via email. I think the third element is collaboration, that we know we can't do this as any single isolated nation. We are dependent upon each other to work together to ensure that we are sharing threat intelligence information, that we are sharing best practices, that we are sharing mitigation to cyber actors as they identify new vulnerabilities or exploiting new vulnerabilities. And so that collaboration needs to continue on a global scale. And again, that collaboration between nations in the private sector, along with security research and other partners who are integral to building our resilience against common adversaries. So it's really that combination of investment, that coordination, and that collaboration that I think are going to help nations become cyber powers as we continue to build resilience.
And so before we dig in a little bit more to how we can better collaborate, whether it's, the public sector and the private sector or between nations, I do want to speak for a moment about the scale of the threat and what types of threats you're seeing within your countries. I might start with Bridget again to share the Canadian perspective, but then turn to each of you in terms of, what's keeping you awake at night.
It's so from the Canadian perspective, I divide the threats into a few pieces. So one, the nation state threat. We certainly, and we put out a threat assessment about every 2 years. The last was approximately a year ago. And we really do see some of those major nation state powers taking actions to preposition. So in particular, seeing the threat coming from the PRC to preposition on networks in North America. We see, and in fact have had 20 cyber incidents from the PRC into Government of Canada networks. And so trying to be quite transparent about how we see that threat. We see other nation states, like in particular Russia, taking very strong actions globally and including threatening Canada. And those nation state actors pose a persistent and strategic threat, meaning that they're skilled. They keep up with technology, they take advantage of technology, and because of that, that threat continues to grow, so we adapt. So while it keeps me up at night, I also know that we're working hard to adapt. It's not easy. The second piece is cybercrime. It's huge, it's enormous. It is the most likely threat that we see impacting Canadians directly, impacting Canadian critical infrastructure, impacting small and medium Canadian businesses. And from that perspective, we're really starting to see how that model changes and how things like crimeware as a service, ransomware as a service, make it so much easier for a threat actor to take action, to take down a network, to ransom someone, but also the psychological aspect of that it goes with it. So, like I said before, that understanding the human being piece to this is so important. How are these criminals taking advantage of our processes to then come into networks to ransom? It's certainly a worrying piece from that perspective. And then finally, I'll say it's the use of technology. So in all of these cases, things like artificial intelligence that have been around for a long time that we've all used have just skyrocketed in their ability and their usability. And so how are these threat actors taking advantage of these pieces? And we've already seen a marked increase in the scale and sort of scope of threat because of artificial intelligence, and we expect to continue to see that. We expect those new technologies, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, to come on scene and really sort of change the environment even more than we have.
Nitin, what about you? What are you seeing as the key threat right now?
So I look at it from two ways. One, the change in the adversary landscape and the change in the victim landscape. And that's really what concerns me the most. If we look at the adversary landscape, we obviously have the nation state threats that Bridget talked about, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and what we're seeing in the increase in frequency, complexity of attacks, what we're seeing among cyber criminal organizations and their prolific volume, again, frequency of attacks. And I think getting people to stop thinking about cyber criminal organizations as people in their parents' basement conducting rogue cyber attacks, but these are well-coordinated, well-funded criminal enterprises, right? We know that they recruit people from one another. We know that they'll close shop and open up in other organizations. We know that they have elaborate networks of support within their areas of operation. So these are true criminal enterprises that are making billions and billions of dollars globally through this type of work. So that change in that adversary landscape is very concerning to me, and I see that continuing to move in a bad direction. Similarly, my concern is the victim landscape is also changing. If we go back 10, 15, 20 years, a majority of cyber attacks were against large government organizations, large businesses. When you contrast that to today, we're seeing attacks against small and medium-sized businesses. We're seeing attacks against individuals. We're seeing attacks against critical infrastructure. We're seeing the pre-positioning of nation-state actors on critical infrastructure with no intelligence purposes, but solely to disrupt operations at a future time and date. So I think those changes in that victim landscape is concerning. We're also seeing victims who were never victims in the past. I always tell people, when you think about even kinetic warfare, we never attacked hospitals. We never attacked medics. We never attacked nurses. You know, in the States, we're seeing hospitals being ransomed on a regular basis. So people who were never victims in the past are now victims, not just in the States, but globally. So that change in that adversary landscape combined with the change in the victim landscape is really setting up a recipe for disaster, for impacting the day-to-day lives of people around the globe. And that's what concerns me the most right now.
Miguel?
What currently keeps me awake is the jet lag, to be honest. But beside of that, I'm a little bit afraid that if you look at somebody who wants to set up a company, what do you need? First of all, you need a great idea. You need something that you say, okay, I want to work very, very hard day and night to achieve this. Those criminals, they have that. They want to earn a lot of money. Then you need resources to people, processes, technology to buy stuff. I read somewhere that this year cybercrime is going to be good for something like $10 billion. I mean, it was like a 1 with 13 zeros. I couldn't even pronounce it. So they have the resources. And then, of course, if you want to set up a company, you need some kind of legal environment that allows you and freedom to do that and to be supportive. They don't have a legal framework, but they have no legal framework or laws at all. They don't care about laws. So if you look at us, and yes, they are even empowered now by new technology like AI. They can use that at the full scope. 82% of all messages, phishing mails that are distributed in our country are AI generated or AI supported. I mean, if we want to implement an AI detection system for anomalies, we can do that. We have the money. If we wait 1 or 2 years as a government agency, we then have a procurement procedure of at least 1 year. And then you have to get access to the information, which is very challenging because all our laws are forbidding us to get access to that information. So they are in the advantage. And that is what is keeping me up at night. We cannot move as fast as they are moving. And that's worrisome.
Not that we need more nightmares, but Antanas, curious your perspective on what are the key threats we're facing right now.
I would like to start from the beginning, because before we speak about AI, post-quantum cryptography, etc., we must look into our basis, as Miguel mentioned, into our cyber hygiene. Because if we implement at least that, we won't be scared adopting or using new technologies, or we will know how to safeguard our data. So, and in this regard, I am really worried that we even know we have a lot of trainings, we have a lot of courses on cybersecurity, on basics, on principles. We know, but we don't act as we know. And until we won't, integrate cybersecurity into our daily business, into our daily processes, we will always be afraid of new technologies, of losing our data, and the bad guys will win because they don't. As Miguel also mentioned, they don't have laws to obey. We have, but sometimes we forget what is the most important, and we just leave it apart.
Major General Hassan?
Sur l'état de la menace pour ce qui a été enregistré par les services de police et de gendarmerie en France, on peut les catégoriser selon 2 parties. La première, c'est tout ce qui est atteinte aux personnes. On n'en a pas beaucoup parlé, mais il y a des atteintes aux personnes qu'on peut qualifier pour une partie qui sont la pédopornographie, qui est un phénomène qui reste important aujourd'hui. Et deuxième, c'est le cyberharcèlement, là aussi très important. La deuxième grande partie des menaces qu'on observe, c'est tout ce qui concerne les atteintes aux biens. Et dans ces atteintes aux biens, on a 80% d'entre elles qui concernent les escroqueries. Les escroqueries qu'on trouvait auparavant sur le monde physique, qui ont largement basculé sur le monde immatériel en IT. Et sur ces escroqueries, elles sont de plus en plus performantes aujourd'hui, et notamment par l'intermédiaire de l'intelligence artificielle, des deepfakes. Quand vous receviez auparavant un mail qui vous demandait d'effectuer un faux ordre de virement, il était truffé de fautes d'orthographe. Aujourd'hui, ce n'est plus le cas. Vous avez des messages qui sont particulièrement bien faits, qui sont rédigés en plusieurs langues aujourd'hui. Ça démultiplie la surface d'attaque. Vous avez aussi une capacité à transformer les images, transformer la voix, transformer aussi des vidéos. Vous pouvez faire une vraie visioconférence avec une fausse voix et une fausse image et demander un faux ordre de virement. Ça, c'est vraiment une démultiplication et on l'observe de manière très forte. Et sur les 20% qui restent des atteintes aux biens, c'est tout ce qui concerne les atteintes au système de traitement automatisé des données. C'est là où on retrouve effectivement les ransomware. Et nous avons une observation qui est assez conforme à ce qui a été évoqué par mes camarades sur la table ronde. On avait auparavant, dans les années 2017-2018, les grands groupes industriels français qui étaient attaqués par les rançongiciels. L'adversaire s'est largement adapté. Le ransomware as a service a d'ailleurs permis aussi, avec un centre d'affiliés, de démultiplier la surface d'attaque à l'encontre d'entités plus petites, les petites et moyennes entreprises, les collectivités territoriales, les hôpitaux, sur des entités qui sont aujourd'hui bien moins matures en termes de cyber et avec des demandes de rançon qui sont proportionnelles très souvent au chiffre d'affaires des entreprises. Et donc, c'est un nouveau modèle économique qui est très pertinent pour l'adversaire.
So we've heard similarities in the responses, right? The speed of attacks, the sophistication of those attacks, the profile of the victims right now, small and medium-sized businesses, but cyberbullying, young people, our hospitals. How do we solve it together? And so I'm curious from your perspectives, what does international cooperation look like in the cyber domain? I might start at the end again with Nitin, with you.
So I think that there's a number of areas we need to focus on. One, obviously, is information sharing. And I think that we've done a much better job over the last several years of sharing information, both on a nation-to-nation basis, but also as we look at sharing information with the private sector, with the public. But I think there's a lot more to be done. Excuse me. I think, to me, my mantra on information sharing is pretty simple. It's how do we get the right information to the right people in a timely manner that results in more informed decision-making. We need to help individuals make the decisions to act, to invest, and into increasing their cyber resilience. So how are we able to work together to continue to strengthen that information sharing? And again, how much we're sharing nation to nation, but also with the private sector and with the general public. And I think we need to continue to do more in that area. I think the other area, though, that's been a challenge and we need to figure out how to do better is as we look at international regulations and we look at standard setting bodies, how are like-minded allies getting together to be able to set those standards in a way that help raise resilience globally? I think it's a challenge right now for private industry to try to meet different standards in different nations, especially multinational corporations that are trying to meet different standards in the EU as opposed to the US and Canada, Australia, and others. And so how are we able to work together at the current speed of technological innovation to be able to set barriers and guardrails around those safety and security matters that are common and important to all of us in a way that allows industry to take rapid and efficient action to raise resilience. So I think those are a few areas that we've made some progress, but we need to focus more time and effort on to continue. Again, at the end of the day, it comes down to resilience for me, and how do we build more of that global cyber resilience against common adversaries.
Miguel, how do we push international cooperation?
Well, I think that one of the main pillars, first of all, is political support to build those capabilities, to collaborate, and to exchange that information. Once you have that political support, you will be able to change the settings that, for instance, it was the counter-ransomware initiative 2 years ago, where we had two platforms to exchange information on ransomware. It was the Crystal Ball and a MISP platform, and there was no information sharing. So the second day, during a breakout session, I asked, okay, what's going on? What is happening? And there was one lady from a country that I will not name who was so courageous to say, we cannot share the IP address of a command and control server because it is GDPR protected, it's PII. Was like, why did we set up two platforms to exchange information if you can not even exchange the IP address of a command and control server? What are we doing here? So in the future, what it looks like is accepting that we will need to be able to exchange information between parties, and that governments and the politics will play an important role in that. We also have to understand that the internet is governed by owned by private companies, and those hyperscalers or those large companies, they are not our enemies. We have to collaborate with them. We have to find a way to get them on board, and together with them to figure out how can we get this under control in a democratic way, with sufficient democratic guarantees that our rights are protected, but still that we can collaborate and that we can do it together. So I think in the future it will be political acceptance that we have to take action and collaboration with those hyperscalers.
That is an absolutely incredible story. And Dennis?
For us, we saw that when you have multiple partners, it's really difficult to find a way of cooperating or way of sharing data, because it's sometimes it's too much. So what we do, we are trying to build and implement smaller scale projects for international collaboration, be it looking deeper into software or hardware, searching for vulnerabilities, or making a study on topic that several partners agree on. And it's a good start. It's a good start. Maybe it won't solve cooperation problems, but at least you gather together those who are interested in a specific topic, in a specific research, if you want it. And the outcome that we can, of course, share the resources. For instance, we can use a Lithuanian lab to find the specific vulnerabilities into of a server that a couple of countries uses. So instead of conducting researches in a separate way, we can pull resources together and have one outcome on several of which several countries agrees. So that could be the way.
Very good starting point. Major General Hassan.
J'aborderai la question sous l'angle de la lutte contre la cybercriminalité une fois de plus. J'identifie deux types de coopération. La première, c'est la coopération opérationnelle dans le cadre des enquêtes judiciaires. Là, typiquement, on a des instances qui existent. Alors, je pense en particulier à Europol, à Interpol, pour les forces de police et de gendarmerie, mais également à l'équivalent Eurojust pour la justice. Parce qu'on a besoin aussi de travailler avec nos partenaires. Les instances existent et ça fonctionne bien. Typiquement, c'est comme ça notamment qu'un dispositif comme Lockbit a pu être démantelé, même si je reste quand même très prudent parce que les groupes criminels ont la capacité à pouvoir se restructurer très rapidement. Le deuxième type de coopération, c'est la coopération structurelle. C'est celle qui va préparer la coopération opérationnelle de demain. Je peux vous donner 3 exemples. Le premier, c'est celui de participer à tout ce qui est normatif au niveau international. Je pense en particulier notamment une convention qui va être signée à Hanoï la semaine prochaine et où j'aurai la possibilité de pouvoir représenter le ministère de l'Intérieur. Donc ça fait partie de cet aspect important en termes de coopération. Et c'est là où justement ça permettra de pouvoir donner les outils in fine aux policiers et aux gendarmes de manière à pouvoir travailler au quotidien dans le cadre de leurs enquêtes. Le deuxième exemple, c'est celui de participer à tout ce qui est instance internationale sur des sujets qui sont très divers. Exemple concret aussi au niveau européen, c'est la plateforme qu'on appelle Impact, qui est une plateforme de lutte contre la criminalité organisée, qui a une composante cyber. Et dans cette composante cyber, il y a 3 priorités. Celle qui concerne les atteintes au système de traitement automatisé de données, c'est là où on retrouve le ransomware. Une deuxième concerne la fraude en ligne, j'ai eu l'occasion de l'évoquer tout à l'heure. Et la troisième, ce sont les abus sexuels sur les mineurs, où on retrouve la pédopornographie. Donc il y a 3 priorités, il faut être très présent dedans et échanger de manière forte en la matière. Exemple aussi sur ce sujet-là, c'est celui du G7, où on avait une réunion la semaine dernière à Ottawa, sous présidence canadienne, avec les différents sous-groupes qui se sont rassemblés, et le commissaire du ministère de l'Intérieur était présent dans son domaine de compétences. Et puis peut-être, dernier point sur cette coopération structurelle, c'est tout ce qui concerne le capacitaire, et notamment la formation. Il y a des écoles régionales à vocation nationale qui sont notamment au Monténégro, aujourd'hui à Podgorica, qui a pour vocation de former les forces de police et gendarmerie locales dans leur domaine de compétences sur tous les Balkans occidentaux. Donc ça, c'est aussi un exemple. Et puis, on peut donner un autre exemple en Afrique de l'Ouest, notamment avec un centre de formation qui est à Dakar, au Sénégal. Et là aussi, l'objectif, c'est de pouvoir donner les outils aux forces de police et de gendarmerie d'Afrique de l'Ouest pour pouvoir travailler et de manière coopérative avec les autres instances à l'international.
Bridget, anything to add here on how we foster more international cooperation?
Yeah, so I think that important piece that was mentioned about information sharing sort of across the board is an underlying theme. And when I think about information sharing, there are barriers. So as was pointed out, being able to protect privacy and share information at the same time is critical. So what are we doing and how do we understand what those barriers are so that we can adapt, so that we can use technology to obfuscate information where we can, etc. But also realizing that the threat actors know and understand where our limitations are. So when we set up information sharing agreements, cooperation agreements, they really need to be adaptable so that we can change, so the threat actors really start taking advantage of new loopholes. We're ready. So the second piece that was certainly underscored from the very traditional things that we've done for a very long time, like standards groups and norm setting, those are foundational and continue to be important. And we need to use those so that we can adapt and change our working models. Merci d'avoir mentionné le G7 parce que groups like the G7 are so important for setting out some of those objectives. What are we going to work on internationally? We participate in a lot of cyber incident response in certain groups and regions that set that table for information sharing so that the relationships are there, so that we can adapt faster. And finally, what is it that we are all doing to look at the technology that underlies all of our information sharing so it can be fast? One of the biggest issues we've got is the time it takes, for a ransomware actor to get onto a system before they are exploiting and demanding a ransom is getting faster and faster. So how are we actually using technology, setting the standards for our information sharing so it all goes very quickly, so that we continue to increase that pace and that speed with which we collaborate and respond?
So in the last little bit of time that we have, I'd like us to think, 5 years into the future. So if we all come back and we sit on this stage again in 5 years, what's going to be different? And how can we start preparing now for that future? Start with you, Bridget.
So when I think to just a few years ago, we weren't as good at sharing information. A lot of the threat intelligence that we have as a community in each of our organizations, sometimes it comes from intelligence, traditional intelligence. Sometimes it comes from information shared from a commercial partner. And sometimes it is proprietary information. So we've come a long way across the board in making sure that we can declassify, that we can share, that we can find mechanisms to share information. I think we're going to get better because it's so important. I think we're going to invest in that even more. Secondly, and I know I've mentioned it a few times, that very human aspect of cybersecurity is changing and growing still. 10 years ago, if I said something about cybersecurity or cryptography to somebody from outside the field, they probably didn't even know what I was talking about. Today, if you talk to somebody on the street, they'd know the words. You hear stories about boards of major corporations not always taking action to have a tabletop exercise, to be prepared, to set things out, to understand how they can respond. I think that's changing. 5 years from now, I think the work that we've all invested in making sure that we are communicating, that the right incentives are in place, are starting to make a bit of a change. On the other hand, the use of artificial intelligence is really still ramping up. And so that cyber threat that we see being posed by those using artificial intelligence is going to continue to increase. We are going to see better skills coming from the threat actors. They are going to improve. So I think for us in the next 5 years, where we need to invest is really continuing to research, to understand both the policy aspects, to disincentivize cyber threat actors, and the way that we respond so that we can take advantage of those same tools and respond in kind.
Thank you.
Alors, je répondrai à la question sur l'aspect technique en évoquant 2 points. Le premier, on a parlé à plusieurs reprises d'intelligence artificielle. On a vu qu'elle était très largement utilisée aujourd'hui par l'adversaire, par les groupes criminels ou par des individus très malveillants. Je souhaite que d'ici quelques années, on puisse l'utiliser davantage pour les forces de sécurité intérieure et qu'on ait notamment dans le domaine du traitement de la donnée de masse quelque chose qui soit très efficace de manière à démultiplier les capacités de nos enquêteurs et de nos analystes en la matière. Et le deuxième point que je souhaite aborder, c'est celui du quantique ou du post-quantique. On sait que le chiffrement évoluera beaucoup. Il évoluera évidemment pour nous, forces de sécurité intérieure, pour potentiellement pouvoir casser des dispositifs de chiffrement, mais on sait qu'il sera aussi utilisé très fortement par l'adversaire, dans la mesure où l'adversaire fait sienne toutes les nouvelles technologies et toutes ces évolutions. Donc là aussi, quelque chose qui peut nous servir à nous, mais qui pourra servir à l'adversaire, et ce sera un nouveau combat à mener, mais c'est aujourd'hui qu'on doit le préparer.
And I would like to offer maybe an optimistic perspective, because I hope that in the 5 years we will overcome our bureaucratical, legal obstacles and our fears of adopting, using technologies that empowers us to safeguard us, our data, our networks, and of course, those obstacles that doesn't allow us to share the information right now. Okay, maybe it's going to be not a 5 years, but 5.5. I will be happy as well.
Miguel?
Well, I think that we will be using cyberspace for wonderful things, and we'll be able to do incredible new stuff on that network, because people tend to adapt when things go wrong. We are able to change that, to implement new security measures, and to make sure that we can continue to do what we want. So it's a bit difficult to predict what exactly that will be, but imagine that the first cars that we put on the road, they didn't have airbags, they didn't have braking lights, there were even no keys. So I think that we will in the future implement solutions, maybe like introducing some kind of digital identity and saying, okay, you work anonymously or you work identified, so that mechanisms can take that into account. We will see that governments collaborate in a different and a much better way, and that information is made actionable. So I think that we will just adopt and make sure that whatever is needed, we will do it. And maybe sometimes, well, a little bit too late, but then we will adapt and adjust and make sure that we can continue in that wonderful cyberspace.
And Nitin, where do you see us in 5 years?
I'd like that we'd be enjoying the opportunity to teleport coffee whenever we wanted. We just hold our hand out and a cup of coffee would show up. However, I think where we'll be is really in two places. One is, everyone has mentioned AI in some capacity. I think, but we'll have a much better sense in talking about the realistic implementation of where AI is in 5 years, what barriers and safeguards and protective measures we have put in place in the implementation of AI. You know, one of the things I've been very vocal about the last several months is we need to deploy AI with intent. And this is a mix of people who are creating AI tools to be transparent about their tools, about data security, data privacy, and then users of AI to be aware of how their data is being utilized and how they're being implemented. So I think we'll be able to have a more realistic conversation of where AI will be, because I think if you look at the predictions now, we're going to be, if you talk about where people believe we're going to be in 6 months and 6 years, they vary drastically depending on who you're speaking with. So I think we'll have that conversation. And I think the other part really for me is back to that nation state threat landscape, and what does that look like as we continue to see, again, more aggressive, more prolific, more, again, volume and complexity of these cyber attacks. If we continue to see APT action, if we continue to see pre-positioning on networks around the globe, what is that going to look like for implementation? Because that's going to impact not just governments and the private sector, but individual citizens of all of our nations. And really, I'm having that conversation on how do we continue to build security and barriers around that over the next 5 years will be critical.
So investment, prioritization, cyber diplomacy, information sharing, collaboration. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and I'd like to thank my panelists, of course, for their insights. It's really greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.